Can. One thing I know that helps many of us get through times of crisis is reading and books. And that's why we decided to present the Ohioana Book Festival virtually in August. And it's why we're presenting the 2020 Ohioana Awards virtually tonight. So let me start again by saying thank you. One thing I know that helps many of us get through times of crisis is reading and books. And that's why we decided to present. So let me start again by saying thank you. One thing I know that helps. I think we're having some technical problems here. Is reading.
Either that, David, or all these things are worth repeating.
I'm hearing myself multiple times.
Yes. It's not listening.
So let me start again by saying thank you. One thing I know that helps. I think we're having some technical problems here. Is reading.
Either that, David, or all these things are.
Do you have the
I'm hearing myself multiple.
Do you have the Ohio channel open, perchance?
Okay, I think I'm back. If someone will tell me I'm back.
You're back.
You're back.
I'm back. Excellent. So, hey, welcome everyone again. Now, do I need to go through all that spiel I just said, or can I just pick up where I left off? What do you think?
We've had a few more people join us, so
okay.
And up to you, but.
Okay, well, that is good. I'm going to start over again. And I apologize. Yes, indeed. I actually found out the trouble was that I had the Ohio channel open as well as the video link. So thanks everybody. This is the wonder of technology that we're all getting used to. So I will start this again, and all of you who have heard this can just pretend the next 3 paragraphs didn't happen. So hello everyone and welcome again. I'm David Weaver, the Executive Director of the Ohioana Library Association. Thank you for coming tonight for what is the most unusual ceremony in the 79-year history of the Ohioana Awards, our first ever to be held virtually. I certainly know this isn't how we all expected to get together. It's been a challenging year for our state, the nation, and the whole world. I know everyone's life has been affected in some way, yet we've all done our best to carry on. One thing I know that helps us get through times of crisis is reading and books. And that's why we decided to present the Ohioana Book Festival virtually this August. And it's why we're presenting the 2020 Ohioana Awards virtually tonight. So let me start by saying a heartfelt thanks to the funders whose generous support has made this possible. The Columbus Foundation, Cover to Cover Books for Young Readers, Huntington Bank, the Ohio Arts Council, PNC Bank, Vorey, Sater, Seymour and Peace, Honda, Margaret Wong and Associates, Crab Brown and James, Overdrive, and Yapko Penn Hollerick LLC. I'd also like to thank our media partner, the Ohio Channel, which is streaming this event live and on YouTube and Facebook, and our in-kind supporters, PXP Ohio and WCVE, and our official bookseller, the Book Loft of German Village. You can get copies of all the winning titles from their website at www.bookloft.com. Also, a huge thanks to the Ohioana Board of Trustees for their support and the amazing Ohioana staff, Catherine Powers, Courtney Brown, and Morgan Peters, who are the guys that always tell me, David, you're not doing something right. So anyway, so I appreciate them very much for getting me through. I'm not tech savvy at all. So now on to the presentation of the awards. We start with the presentation of the 2020, excuse me, Walter Rumsey Marvin Grant, named for Ohioana's second director and endowed in 1982 by his family. The Marvin Grant is a competitive prize to recognize an emerging Ohio writer 30 years or younger who has not yet published a book. Winning the Marvin Grant has helped launch a number of successful authors, including 2 of tonight's book award winners, which is a first. So that's really exciting. And introducing this year's recipient will be Stephen Moore, representing the Columbus Foundation, which sponsors the award through the Marvin Fund. So welcome, Stephen.
Thank you so much, David. And I'm so pleased to introduce Brendan Kurtenrich. Brendan is a native of Geauga County who studied at Hiram College and holds an MFA in creative writing and environment from Iowa State University. He has served as a nonfiction editor at Flyway, a journal of writing and environment, is currently a contributing editor at Split Rock Review. Brendan is a Triple Crown backpacker, and he writes primarily about ecological issues, particularly the ways human animals affect and are affected by the world around them, in publications including Trail Runner, Gigantic Sequence, and Appalachia. Brendan, we are so pleased at the Columbus Foundation to join with Ohioana in saluting you as a 2020 Walter Rumsey Marvin Grant recipient. Congratulations.
Thank you, Stephen. I just want to say how grateful I am for this recognition. I'm so fond of the 22 years that I spent growing up in Northeast Ohio. The landscape, the communities, the teachers and professors and other writers from Ohio have all just had a tremendous influence on my life. And I think Ohio will always be where I feel most at home. So I just want to thank the Columbus Foundation and the Ohioana Library Association for this award. It really does mean so much. Thank you.
Congratulations, Brendan. And thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Columbus Foundation, for many years partnering with the Ohioana Library in the presentation of this award. And by the way, I want to say you can read 2 of Brendan's essays in the fall Ohioana Quarterly, which we just uploaded today. So congratulations again, Brendan, and all the best to you. As you will see later tonight, you've got some big shoes to fill, some inspiring authors who've come before you as Marvin winners. So thank you. And now we move on to the Ohioana Book Awards. First given in 1942, the Ohioana Book Awards are the second oldest state literary prize in America. Only the California Book Awards are older. More than 500 books by Ohioans or about Ohio have been honored since 1942. And tonight we add 7 more titles to that distinguished list. The awards are presented in 7 categories. We're going to begin with the category of book about Ohio or an Ohioan, which is sponsored by PNC Bank. This is the only book award that could be won by an author who is not an Ohioan, so long as their subject is Ohio related. And this year's winner is David McCullough for the Pioneers. Unfortunately, David could not join us tonight, but he has asked a very special friend to stand in for him, someone who is quite familiar to all Ohioans, a longtime legislator, the 69th governor of Ohio, and may I add, and I know he won't mind, himself, a New York Times bestselling author, former Governor John Kasich. Governor Kasich, welcome
David.
and thank you.
Well, listen, David, thank you. You know, when the McCullough family asked me if I might step in and accept this award on David's behalf. This is like the greatest thing ever, right? And you've known David McCullough for a long time. He wants you to know how much he appreciates your friendship. It's an awesome opportunity for me to be here. I want to thank Martha Cooper. Maybe people don't know much about her, but she was the first lady of Ohio. And in 1929, she started this right in the governor's mansion, and then moved it into moved it a couple times into the building where you are. Your organization is fabulous. And I know, David, that you spent time with my wife when she was first lady, and we so much believe in you and in reading and in studying and in literary. It's just wonderful. McCullough, as you know, for those that don't know who he is, I think, David, I think he's indispensable. Nobody's going to be able to ever fill his shoes. The things that he has done, the book, The Pioneers, of course, if you're an Ohioan and you want to learn about Marietta and you want to learn about Cincinnati and you want to learn about Zanesville, and this is the book you need to read. And it's the settling of the Northwest Territory. And one of the things we can be most proud of, as he details in his book, the fact that Northwest Territory, Ohio, remained slave-free. And David's report, is just, see, the thing about McCullough, you have to ask yourself, how does he get all this stuff? Because it's so brilliant, it's so detailed, starting with the early landing in Marietta and how they built the settlement and all the things that they went through. It's a fascinating book. But as I think you mentioned, or somebody sent in some notes, one of my favorite books, and I love Pioneers, but one of my favorite books is The Wright Brothers.
Yes.
For those that have not read The Wright Brothers, you've got to get it. In fact, my wife and I were just headed down to Dayton, and I made sure that we pulled over and stopped to see that area where the Wright brothers had flown the plane. It was always amazing to me, as the Wright brothers were flying that plane, the Dayton Daily News couldn't figure out how to get to the edge of town and watch them bring birth flight and all this business about North Carolina and, you know, the land of flight. All they had was the sand dunes and a little wind. All the work was done in Ohio. But I'm just going to suggest to all of you here, the Wright brothers, unbelievable book. The Johnstown Flood. David, I don't know if you've ever read that. It's another remarkable story that it sheds light on sometimes the power of people who have wealth and how they proceeded in terms of the efforts they made along the Johnstown, that created the problems around the Johnstown flood. I am just currently almost 500 pages into the book on John Adams. And what I learned, and this is why Ohioana is so important, this award so important, is in reading through that book, we talk about how divided we are as a country today. Go back and read that book about what was happening at the end of the 18th century. And I'm sorry, did I get that wrong? I guess I'm saying the 17th century, David, was an unbelievable period. The division, the fighting, just absolutely remarkable. His book about the Panama Canal, Harry Truman, the Brooklyn Bridge, all of it is great, but none of them are as great as the Pioneers and the Wright brothers. Two stories that really highlight the greatness of Ohio and how we were leaders in this country. When you read his book, you say, I have no idea how he put all this together. And one of the things that I know the McCullough family wanted to point out is wanted to thank the staff at Marietta College Library, especially Linda Showalter, head of the Special Collections Department at the Legacy Library, who provided him with a treasure trove of original archival material to chronicle the lives of the central characters in the Pioneers. And those were, of course, Manasseh and Ephraim Cutler and the indomitable Rufus Putman, which is an amazing man. The staffs of the Campus Martius Museum in Marietta and the Ohio History Connection in Columbus, Ohio, both of which provided him and his research assistant, Mike Hill, amazing and valuable research that allowed him to put this book together. I wish he was here. I thought so much of him, David. I met him once in Boston where he sang a little song and did a little dance, which was as delightful as anything. But then I had him come to the cabinet and address the cabinet when he was honored at the Ohio State House. Just a fabulous guy, unlike anybody else, almost without a peer. And I think he would so deeply appreciate this award, and I know his family does. And I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity to say some good things about him and about the work that you, David, and the whole team are doing to promote reading and all forms of literary work. So thank you, and God bless us, all of us.
Thank you, John. And David did say to be sure and thank you for taking the time to represent him tonight. And so I know that they were thrilled when you said yes. And I want to say a personal thank you to you for you and Karen and all the support you gave Ohioana in the 8 years that you were in office. So thanks so much. Best of luck to you. I know you've got a busy fall ahead. I see you periodically on CNN with Don Lemon. So I'll look forward to seeing you there again, I'm sure, soon. So,
David, one final thing. I think we all have to always realize how important the arts are in the great state of Ohio and in our country. And so regardless of what happens in politics and budgets, there always has to be room for the arts.
Yes.
They're the civilizing factor in our culture and society today. Thank you, David, and God bless all the winners here.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you all. Well, what a way to kick off the book awards. So thank you once again, and congratulations to David McCullough. I might point out David McCullough is the first ever two-time winner of the Ohioana Book Award in the category of book about Ohio or Ohioan. His last victory was for the Wright brothers in 2016. So two Ohioana Book Awards for him, along with 2 National Book Awards and 2 Pulitzer Prizes and a slew of other awards. So congratulations to David McCullough. We're sorry he could not be here. So now we're going to move on to the Reader's Choice Award, which is the newest of our book awards. It was created for our 75th anniversary of the Ohioana Book Awards in 2016. And this award gives readers the chance to vote online for their favorite book from among all of the finalists in all 6 categories. So this year's runaway choice, I have to say, of readers was Ken Kaufman, who won for his book, A Season on the Wind. And introducing Ken will be Ohioana's board president, John Sullivan, who is also an attorney for our event sponsor, Honda. So welcome, John.
Thank you, David. A Season on the Wind takes a close look at one season and one key site along Lake Erie in northwestern Ohio. In doing that, it reveals the amazing science and magic of spring bird migration and the perils of human encroachment. The author, Ken Kaufman, is the originator of the Kaufman Field Guide series and one of the world's foremost naturalists. Congratulations, Ken.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. It's sort of a heady challenge to be following David McCullough and John Kasich. But I just want to say, as John Sullivan was saying, the migration of birds is a phenomenon that's really massive in scale. Every spring and fall, there are billions of birds moving across the face of the globe. And some of them are traveling thousands of miles, and they can navigate with pinpoint accuracy. A little songbird weighing less than an ounce can leave its nesting territory in Canada and fly to Brazil in the fall. And then the following spring, it can come back and find its way back to the very same tree that it left the previous year. It's just, to me, it all seems like a miracle. And the more I study the science of it, the more I'm filled with a sense of wonder about it all. I'm lucky to live in one of the best places in the world to witness the spring migration. Every spring, vast numbers of small birds coming north from the tropics reach the edge of Lake Erie in northwestern Ohio, and then they pause to think about it and rest and feed and get ready for their next flight going on north into Canada. And so these huge concentrations of little birds build up, and it creates a spectacle that attracts bird watchers from all over the world. I mean, seriously, you can talk to bird watchers in England or South Africa or Australia and mention McGee Marsh, and they know all about it. A lot of them have been here. But to me, it's just as important that the local community has embraced this. And from Toledo to Sandusky to Fremont to Findlay, everyone is aware of this spring arrival of birds and bird watchers, and they're aware of this thing that we call the biggest week in American birding. And to me, that's the best thing about it. And I think that may explain why a book about bird migration could win a Reader's Choice Award. It's, you know, right now, obviously, we're going through some really challenging times in this country, but even when things seem hopeless, you can find reassurance by going outside or even looking out the window and paying attention to birds and nature. It's, you know, winter is coming on and everything might seem dark for a while, but there are birds out there, even in the depths of winter. And before the end of February, the spring migration will be beginning. There will be red-winged blackbirds moving north across the landscape and other birds, horned larks and things. Then in March, there will be flocks of ducks and the cardinals will be starting to tune up and robins will reappear in yards where they haven't been seen for many weeks. And it's all like a promise that spring is coming back. So, you know, no matter what's happening in human society, if we pay attention to the birds, they will be following the same rhythms that they've followed for ages. And I think, you know, whether or not you decide to read my book, I hope you'll think about paying attention to the birds and just seeing about the ways that they can bring comfort and reassurance into your life. So thank you so much to the Ohioana Library Association. I'm just so honored, and all my birdwatching friends are honored, and the Black Swamp Bird Observatory, which was the source for the information, we're all just so appreciative to you.
You are quite welcome, Ken, and we were honored and thrilled, and so congratulations to you. I have to say, I think one of the reasons why we had a larger number of votes for you than anybody in the 5-year history of this award, and I said, it must be all the bird watchers across the country. So they all came out in force for you, and we're just thrilled, you know, to share this honor with you. And I want to thank you again, and thank John Sullivan, and thank Honda. So, okay, on now to our next award. The Ohio Arts Council funds programs and organizations with state tax dollars to encourage cultural growth, educational excellence, and cultural enrichment for all Ohioans. It also presents the annual Poetry Out Loud competition for the state of Ohio, which is a project Ohioan has been involved with since its inception in 2006. So it's appropriate that the Ohio Arts Council has sponsored the Ohioana Book Award in Poetry, and this year marks the 10th consecutive year that it has done so. This year's poetry winner is Hanif Abdurraqib for A Fortune for Your Disaster. Introducing Hanif, who will appear on video, is Chiquita Mullins-Lee, the Arts Learning Program Coordinator at the Ohio Arts Council. Welcome, Chiquita.
Thank you, David. Hanif Abdurraqib is a poet, essayist, and cultural critic from Columbus, Ohio, whose books have made him one of today's most acclaimed literary voices. A Fortune for Your Disaster is a collection of poems about how one rebuilds oneself after a heartbreak, after wrestling with histories, personal and shared. The Ohio Arts Council and Poetry Out Loud join with Ohioana in congratulating Hanif Abdurraqib. Thank you, and congratulations.
Hello, everyone. Apologies for my absence. I'm expressing immense gratitude for this honor and for everyone at Ohioana, for everyone on the board, for all the fellow poets who were in the category with me, for all the other winners tonight. This is an immense honor. You know, it means a lot to me. It has always meant a lot to me to come from a state like Ohio, which is a rich literary state with a rich literary history, and to even get to kind of have a small corner of that world means so much to me. And I hope that everyone tonight is feeling thankful to get to bask in some human interaction, even though it's not the same as we normally would have it. But I hope everyone is staying well. I hope everyone is staying inspired, and I hope everyone is taking care of themselves, even on the days that writing isn't coming. I wish I could be there with all of you. I am immensely thankful, and I hope that our paths all cross when we're out in the world once again. Thanks, y'all.
Our congratulations to Hanif and our thanks to Chiquita Mullins-Lee and to the Ohio Arts Council, our sponsor. The middle grade Young Adult Literature Award is our second newest award. It was first presented in 2015. This year's winner is Jasmine Warga for her book, Other Words for Home. Jasmine will be introduced by a longtime Ohioana board member, Lisa Evans, who is also a vice president at Huntington Bank, which is our award sponsor. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, David.
Hello.
How are you?
I am good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Other Words for Home is a novel in verse about a young girl who must leave Syria to move to the United States. A lyrical, life-affirming story. It is a Newbery Honor book as well as an Ohioana Award winner. Jasmine Varga is also the author of 2 novels for teens. A native of Cincinnati, she now lives and writes in Chicago. Jasmine, Huntington Bank is so proud to join Ohioana in congratulating you on your award.
Hi, thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you so much to Ohioana Library for this honor. I was born and raised in Ohio, and so it's particularly thrilling to have my work honored by my home state. The impact and influence of Ohio features prominently in my work, from the texture of Midwestern culture to the descriptions of moody and unpredictable weather. And I infuse so much of what I love about my hometown, Cincinnati, into Other Words for Home when I was building the setting and detailing the main character, Jude's first impressions of America. I'm also the proud daughter of an immigrant. My father moved from the Middle East to Ohio over 30 years ago and made his home here. And I want to thank Ohioana Library in particular for honoring Other Words for Home, and in doing so, showing that immigrant and refugee stories are Ohio stories. Immigrants and refugees enrich the cultural fabric of Ohio, and I look forward to our state continuing to grow more diverse and more welcoming. I think we'll all be better for it. So thank you so much. And I just want to say a quick hello to my daughters who are watching this downstairs on YouTube. So hi, Lillian, and hi, Juniper. I love you. So thank you all so much. It's such an honor.
Oh, congratulations, Jasmine, and hello to your daughters. And thank you, Lisa Evans, and thank you, Huntington Bank, for sponsoring the award. Next, we present the award in juvenile literature. Our winner is Oge Mora for Saturday. Introducing Oge will be Malia Wolf, who is the owner of Cover to Cover Books for Young Readers, which is sponsoring the Juvenile Literature Award this year. So welcome, Malia.
Thank you, David. Cover to Cover is pleased to join Ohioana in honoring one of our favorite authors, Oge Mora. A Caldecott and Coretta Scott King Award honoree, Oge is a native of Columbus and a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design. Her Ohioana award-winning book, Saturday, follows a mother and daughter on an up and down journey that reminds them of what's best about Saturdays, which is precious time together. Oge, I just have to say, on a personal note, you created a new visual language of storytelling, and it speaks to our hearts, and we're so grateful to have your books and share them with our community. Congratulations, Oge. Thanks.
Oh,
hi, Oge.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Can you hear me? Wonderful. I want to first thank you, Malia, so much for introducing me so beautifully. So sad that unfortunately, we all can't be together in Ohio in order to celebrate my fellow amazing, talented winners as well. I am an author and illustrator, and my book is Saturday, and it's about a mom and a daughter named Ava. And the mom works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And Saturday is the day that they spend together. They have some big plans for their Saturday, but as we know in life, and as we know because of quarantine, things don't always go as planned. But I think the real special thing about this book is not that their plans go awry, but how they react. And they always react with positivity, and they keep pushing forward, and they focus on what matters, is that they're there together. I know that right now we are all going through some very, very stressful, troubling times. And it can feel like the problems that we have in front of us are just big, that they're so big they can overwhelm us at times. And I think the thing I love the most about collage, because I'm a collage artist, is I love that collage is a medium in which I get to take small little scraps of paper that you have around, things we overlook all the time, things that we don't really think have much worth. And I get to put them on the page, and I get to reveal all the magic that's within them. And it makes me think of, what are the other things that are in my life that I'm overlooking? What are these other things that are present in our day that we think are small, we think are ordinary, and think they're things that aren't very important. But when we really think about those things, those are everything. And sometimes it's just a kind word from someone. Sometimes it's just a hug. Sometimes it's just a, hey, are you doing okay? And sometimes, as they show in this book, it's stopping, pausing, and just taking a deep breath. These small, ordinary things can really be everything and have power, and we should never truly overlook them. When I first wrote this book, I thought I was writing a book about time. How time is this interesting kind of construct, but the more and more I thought of it, and as I was working on this book, and as I got a chance to interact with readers and hear their stories, I realized I had written a book about love. And when I think about love, and I think about the love that's been given to me, so much of it has originated here in Ohio. It's from the local library that I grew up by, where all the librarians knew my name and always recommended me books. It's from the King Arts Complex, where I learned about so many magnificent Columbus-based artists like Elijah Pierce and Amina Robinson. It's from my local church. It's from my family, my friends. I want to thank Ohio from the bottom of my heart for all the love you gave me growing up and continue to give me, and how this state has supported my career. Because at some point I just came so overwhelmed with it, I just had to spill it on the page. And that's how we get books like Saturday. And so I'd like to just thank my family, Obi, Iffy, Abella, Onyi, Bolsa, Adora, and Chica, my siblings, and my parents, and most particularly my mom, for making this book possible. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Oge, and congratulations once again. And thank you, Malia Wolf, and thank you, Cover to Cover. I know that Oge has a very close and special relationship with you, so I'm just delighted that you were the first people that said, we want to sponsor the award that's going to Oge. So that was wonderful. So thank you also so very much. I mentioned earlier that two of our past Walter Rumsey Marvin Grant recipients are winners tonight of Ohioana Book Awards. And so now with the next two categories, you are going to meet those authors. The winner in the nonfiction category is Jeannie Van Asco for Things We Didn't Talk About When I Was a Girl. Introducing Jeannie will be Katie Brandt, a member of the Ohioana Board, in fact, our newly elected vice president, and co-chair of the 2020 Ohioana Book Awards. So welcome, Katie, and welcome back, Jeannie.
Thanks, David. Things We Didn't Talk About When I Was a Girl is part memoir and part true crime record that asks the question, is it possible for a good person to commit a terrible act? The author, Jeannie Van Asco, was Ohioana's 2014 Walter Rumsey Marvin Grant recipient, and her first book, The Glass Eye, was published in 2017. A Sandusky native, Jeannie now lives in Baltimore, where she teaches at Towson University. So on behalf of the Ohioana community, congratulations, Jeannie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here in this virtual space with you all. Obviously, I wish we could be celebrating in more dimensions, but I'm really honored by this and to be surrounded by so many other great writers. And yeah, it was like back in 2014 when David called me, and it was back when my first book was just a Word document or many Word documents on my computer. And I really wasn't sure if I could make it work. And I got that phone call from David saying that I had received the Marvin grant. And I remember the night before, I hadn't slept, and like into the morning, I had been working on my manuscript. I had like printed it out and cut it apart and was rearranging pieces, and I was just really losing confidence in it. So getting that early support from Ohioana meant a lot to me. And Ohioana has certainly stayed with me and supported both of my books. And I'm really grateful to that, to Ohioana for doing that. And the state of Ohio has stayed with me. You know, I was born and raised in Sandusky, Ohio, and my mom was a librarian at the Sandusky Public Library. And yeah, I'm really sad I can't be there, but thank you so much for this honor. It really means a lot. And thank you, David, especially for standing by me and, you know, and calling to see what you could do for the book. I never even had to ask. So I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Well, you are quite welcome. Congratulations, Jeannie. We're very thrilled for you. You're carrying on a great tradition, and we wish you all the best in your future writing endeavors, and we will be there for you. So congratulations again, and thanks, Katie Brandt, for presenting the award. Our final award is the Ohioana Book Award in Fiction, which goes to Salvatore Scabona for his novel, The Volunteer. Introducing Salvatore will be Dan Shuey, who just stepped down as president of the Ohioana Board and is a partner with the law firm of Borey, Sater, Seymour, and Peace, which has sponsored the Fiction Book Award since 2011. So welcome, Dan, and welcome, Salvatore.
Thank you, David. Salvatore Scabona's The Volunteer is the epic story of a restless young man who was captured during the Vietnam War and pressed into service for a clandestine branch of the United States government. Salvatore received Ohioana's Walter Rumsey Marvin Grant in 1999. 10 years later, his debut novel, The End, was a National Book Award finalist and won the Young Lions Fiction Prize from the New York Public Library. Originally from Cleveland, Salvatore now lives in New York City, where he is the Sue Ann and John Weinberg Director of the Coleman Center for Scholars and Writers at the New York Public Library. On behalf of the Voorhees Law Firm and the Ohioana Board, congratulations, Salvatore.
Thanks very much. Thanks to everyone who's made this possible over almost 80 years. And congratulations to the other writers here. I also owe a debt of thanks and an apology to the dedicated staff that ran the Strongsville branch of the Cuyahoga County Public Library between 1978 and 1993 when I lived there. I knew I wasn't supposed to write in the margins of your books, but they were about the only books I had access to at the time. And evidently I was desperate to write on something. I'm speaking to you now from Brooklyn, New York. My first home, as chance would have it, was Brooklyn, Ohio. 7 of my great-grandparents immigrated to Greater Cleveland and they all died there. All my grandparents were born and died in Greater Cleveland. I grew up there and my whole family still lives there. It's an unfair advantage for a fiction writer to grow up in the same place as his parents and grandparents. Nothing in your hometown is merely what you see now, but is also, by way of family gossip, what it was 30 years ago and 30 years before that. You get used to seeing the narrative inside of things, the way life accumulates generation by generation in a place, and often the way people carry around a phantom version of their first homes wherever they go. For example, when I was a graduate student at the University of Iowa, I lived a quarter mile south of the old Capitol building at the center of town. That is, I believed it was south. In fact, it was due east. I could never get my bearings. The sun always seemed to rise in the wrong place. Where did this delusion come from? After about a year of living there, I realized that having grown up south of downtown Cleveland, I considered north the direction toward the center of the big city. No evidence to the contrary has ever been quite persuasive. The place you come from sets your compass, and to some degree, it freezes there. So I'm grateful to think that your association regards this book, which takes place in Iowa, Vietnam, New York, New Mexico, and Germany, as a piece of Ohioana, which inevitably it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Salvatore, and congratulations, and thanks to Dan and DeVories. Congratulations to all of the 2020 Book Award winners, and to Brendan Kurtenrich, and thanks to all of our sponsors and presenters. So now, with the awards having been presented, this would normally be the point where, if we were at the State House, the authors would be moving over to a table and signing copies of their books. So, but since we are not doing that, we thought it would be fun to have a roundtable so that we could hear the authors talking about their creative inspiration, their writing process, and whatever else might come to their mind. And to moderate our panel, we're delighted to welcome back a longtime friend, Linda Fegler, who was the longtime senior editor at Ohio Magazine and a past Ohioana board member. And while Linda will be leading the discussion, one of the great things about being virtual is that everyone out there in the audience can also ask questions of the panelists. Simply use, and I hope I'm right on this, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, the chat function on the lower part of your screen, which you can submit your question. And we'll do our best to take as many as we can. So Linda and all of our authors and writers, take it away. Linda? Linda has frozen on me. Linda Fegler, I don't know how to reach her. Somebody, Morgan or Courtney or somebody who's our technical people, if they can reach Linda Fegler. So, but in any case, well, I'll start the discussion off, because one book or one thing that I always like to know about every author, because our thing is every writer is first a reader. So when you were a young reader, was there one particular book or one particular author who inspired you? So who was your creative muse, Salvatore Scabona, since you are our last award winner speaker? So we'll have you start off in reverse.
I really loved a book called, I didn't read very much as a little boy. I started reading in high school. I loved A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. I remember for the first time in my life, I read for about 3 hours without stopping. And I can still remember coming downstairs to get a glass of water, and I was narrating in my mind in complete sentences what I was doing as I was doing it. And I had never had an experience anything like that before. The language had gotten into my neural processing, and I was hooked.
Excellent. Linda Fegler.
We had a connection for, technology is great when it works. So thank you.
Well, I started off, I just asked a question and Salvatore was the first to respond.
All right, great. We're off to a good start.
Was there one particular book or author when you were young that was your creative muse that made you say, by golly, that's what I want to do? So Salvatore was the first person.
Okay, let's start with that question. That's a great question, David. How about everyone joining with that and sharing their favorite authors? Anybody want to start?
I guess I'll just follow.
Sure, absolutely.
I think I'll stay to picture books. I think 2 picture books actually come to mind, or really one picture book and one illustrator who comes to mind. My favorite picture book of all time is Tar Beach by Faith Ringgold. I particularly loved that book. I related a lot to the little girl in the book. She grew up in the city. I grew up in the city. And I just liked this idea of this little girl who would fly across the sky. I'm also a very big fan of, sadly, he passed away this year, Tommy DePaula.
Okay, thank you.
Ken Kaufman, I was wondering if maybe your favorite book as a young reader was Daphne du Maurier's The Birds.
No, I was a voracious reader as a kid. I read, science fiction and history and biographies and things. But in terms of nature writing, books by Roger Torrey Peterson were the ones that I actually memorized. The ones where I got to the stage where I could recite entire chapters. And so later I got to know Peterson in person, and he told me he thought I was a good writer because I sort of copied his style.
Well, that must be great, to have somebody that you admired as a writer tell you that he likes your writing. So how about you, Jasmine Warga?
Yeah, I remember as a kid loving so many different stories, particularly middle grade novels, which I think it's no surprise then that it ended up there. Everything from Charlotte's Web to The Bridge to Terabitha to The Giver, all those books sort of imprinted on me. But I want to give a special shout out to an Ohio writer, Margaret Peterson Haddix, who wrote a book called Running Out of Time that we were assigned when I was in grade school. And that book absolutely captivated me. I lived in that world, and I remember getting to meet Margaret a few years ago and having a freak out because at this point I'd met lots of other writers, but that seemed so wild that this person who had written this book that had captivated me as a child was a living, breathing writer still working in Ohio. So I think that's really cool.
Fantastic. Brendan.
Yes. Names that come to my mind. Mary Pope Osborne was the writer who kind of flipped the switch when I was really young. And then Jean Craighead George, My Side of the Mountain, was really influential when I was young. We read that in class in 4th grade, and that really stayed with me for a long time. And then eventually, as I got older, I graduated to really enjoy and admire the writings of another Ohio writer, Ian Fraser, and his essays that he's published.
Fabulous. And last but not least, Jeannie Van Asco. You've written mostly memoir, but is that what you read as a young reader?
No, I was always interested in books I wasn't supposed to read. So I remember going to the library. We went to the local library all the time, and my dad was often reading. I wondered what he was reading. He was always fascinated by these books, and they were always about the mafia. So I was like in the 1st and 2nd grade reading books about the mob, just because I wanted to, if he was interested in it, I wanted to be interested in it. But another book though, a children's book, a more age appropriate book for me at that time, would have been the story. I'm sure a lot of you know it. I don't know who the original author would have been, but it was the story of the girl who wore a ribbon around her neck. And you don't know why she won't take the ribbon off. And does anyone know this? No. Oh, okay. There's this great writer, Carmen Maria Machado, did a retelling of this story in her story collection, Her Body and Other Parties. But it's a children's book. The whole book, this girl has a ribbon around her neck. And at the end, you discover, spoiler, the reason why is she takes the ribbon off and her head falls off. And that just blew my mind in kindergarten. I thought that was the coolest thing, and that you could just do that in writing. So yeah, mafia biographies, and then I guess they could be related in some degree. And the girl with the ribbon.
Excellent.
Great answers.
Thank
Wonderful.
you all for responding. So Linda, let's hope you stay unfrozen here.
Okay, I know. And you can call on our authors, David. Could you all talk a little bit about the inspiration behind your latest works? Anybody can start? Brendan, you want to start?
I can give it a shot. So I just finished up my MFA at Iowa State University. So my thesis, my body of work that I just created for my thesis is I think the freshest on my mind. Gosh, some of the books that I was reading while I was composing that I was trying to emulate. Probably a little bit of Ian Fraser, who I mentioned before, and his nonfiction essays, just his inquisitiveness and his ability to just kind of sit in place and luxuriate in the details of a setting. He has this great essay about Canal Street in New York City, and the descriptions and details are just so rich in that essay. John McPhee, his book, particularly Coming to the Country, a lot of nonfiction work, I think has been kind of like at the forefront of my mind in the essays that I've been writing most recently. I think, I don't know.
Okay, that's great.
That might be,
Thank you.
yeah.
Who would like to go next? Jeannie, you want to try?
Sure, I'll try.
Okay.
So I would say actually the inspiration for my second book would have been, though it had been around for a while, but the increased attention to the Me Too movement. So I was at the height of the Me Too movement. I want to say it was like after the fall, it was the month that my first book came out. And I was getting asked a lot of questions about this very short scene in my first book where sexual assault happens. And I just kind of go past it. And I didn't think anything of it, but so many people at bookstores were asking me about it. And I got to thinking about why I hadn't included it in my first book, and that I thought it made things uneven, or it was inconvenient on a craft level. And I'm interested a lot of times in the stuff that makes writing inconvenient, especially in memoir. I like to think of facts as formal constraints, or facts as well as I know them. And I got to thinking about this sexual assault, and it had been by one of my closest friends growing up. And I thought, I wonder if he still thinks about it. So I reached out to him and asked him if he would go on the record and answer my questions about this this event that happened back in, like it would have been 14 years prior. And he agreed because he had felt guilty all these years. And so him saying yes really got me to investigate larger questions about, like, is it possible to be a good person who commits a terrible act? And what does forgiveness look like? And what does punishment look like? And restorative justice. So I'd say the increased attention on the Me Too movement definitely inspired me.
Okay, thank you. Jasmine, how about you?
Yeah, so all of my books, they tend to start with a question that I have about the world or about our society. And this book in particular started with this question of, I was trying to figure out why so many people in this country seemed afraid of these children who are fleeing from a war zone. And then I started to dig deeper into sort of what it means to be a Muslim American, what it means to be an Arab American in this particular moment in America. And then kind of branching out from there, this question of how do I write a book about the universality though of being 12, about showing that these kids who probably have very different journey and lives than, say, a child growing up in suburban Ohio. At the end of the day, the interiority of their thoughts and dreams, there's a lot of commonalities. So I guess all of those questions kind of culminated into wanting to write Other Words for Home, and sort of wanting to see a book that I thought was empowering in terms of the refugee experience, as opposed to being so wrought with trauma, which obviously there's a lot of difficulties in Jude's journey, but there's also a lot of joy, and that was really important to me.
Okay. Who would like to go next? I don't want to call on you guys, so just jump in.
I think it's kind of interesting, being an artist, is that I think a lot of times we joke about how we want to kind of sit in the studio in order to kind of think of our ideas, but all the ideas happen when you turn the lights off and you leave the studio and you just go out and you experience life. I'm definitely, when I think about introvert or extrovert, I definitely am on the extroverted kind of side. And I love talking to people and I love interacting with people and connecting with people. And I find more people I connect with and interact with, there'll just be ideas that'll come to mind. I'll run into a little girl and I'll be really fascinated by her really cool pattern leggings. And suddenly a little girl with pattern leggings shows up in my books. Like I'll have a conversation with my sister and I'll be like, oh, then that should be kind of added in there. I think what's just really cool about being an artist is just staying open to those kind of moments of inspiration where it hits you every single day.
Great, thanks. Next.
Okay. Well, it's easy for me to say, because my latest book was about the spring migration here in northwestern Ohio, and after living through it year after year, you get these days in late April when it seems like things have been stuck for a while, and the trees aren't really leafing out and the birds haven't really arrived, and you're waiting and looking at the weather patterns day after day. And then there's this glorious day when everything comes piling in, and there's south winds overnight, and you go out in the morning and there are all these little birds all over the trees, these colorful warblers that just spent the winter in South America. And it's like, it's like resurrection. It's like you've been born again, and here's all this variety and abundance of life. And I didn't really start writing the book until I reached the point where there was no way I could stop myself from writing it. It was something I had to do.
It seems like the time, because you've helped us so many times at Ohio Magazine with wildlife questions we have, but this seemed like a time for you to, it's just something a little different for you, isn't it? It's more of a personal journey.
Yeah, it was just sort of I was trying to describe the science, but more so describe the magic of it and just the emotional response.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next.
Yeah, I sympathize a lot with what Jasmine said about starting with a question. I had, and also what Oge said about the idea coming the moment you stop writing. You have the perfect place to work, and then it comes to you the moment you close the door. But I was staying in Latvia for a while, and then was visiting my German publisher in Hamburg. On the way back, I had about 6 or 7 euros left in my pocket. I was going back to Latvia, and Latvia was not on the euro at the time. I just hate having money that I can't spend, So I got in line to get onto my flight, and there was I was just going to ask the guy at the desk how much it cost to buy a martini on this plane, because I thought that would be the perfect way of blowing my last euros. But it would be so infuriating if the martini cost 8 euros and I'd be stuck with this money. So, and I had nothing else to do. So meantime, as I was waiting, there was a child in front of me who, he was about 4 or 5 years old, and he was crying in this really controlled, but clearly really terrified way. And the flight attendant and his mother were sort of bent down, trying to calm him down. And then the woman I took to be his mother went and sat in the seats and talked to somebody else. And I realized she wasn't the mother at all. She was just trying to help. Then the woman from the airline took the kid away. He's crying continually the whole time, 10 or 15 minutes. It takes about 10 to 15 more minutes for me to get to the front of the line. And I asked the guy at the desk, how much does it cost to buy a martini on this plane? And he said, I don't know. I said, you have no idea? He said, I don't work for this airline. This is a Latvian airline. They have one flight into this airport. I work for the airport. And I said, oh, damn. What was the matter with that kid? And just as he said that, the woman who had taken the kid away brought him back around the corner, and he was crying just the same way for half an hour. He was crying the entire time. And he said, nobody can figure out what language she's speaking.
Oh, wow.
As it turned out over time, over the next half hour or so, it became pretty obvious that someone had left him there on purpose. And other people did the best thing that we could. We were like sort of pelting him with different languages that we trying to figure out. Someone was sure that he was Estonian, but whatever language he started speaking at the beginning was very obscure. Nobody understood it. And then he just stopped talking altogether. So eventually I followed them down to the end of the secure area of the airport, and she took him through the door. The door closed and I never saw him again. When I finally got on the plane, it was everybody. It was, I mean, for an hour on the flight, everybody had seen this happen, and the whole room, the whole airplane was full of people who were just sick with terror, like on behalf of this child, and none of us could ever, as far as I know, ever find out. So my book is, it was about 10 years of writing the book, was how did that boy get there? And so it goes back to Vietnam. My answer is that goes to his father. His father's left him there, and his father is a Vietnam veteran who becomes the main character of the book, The Volunteer.
Wow.
So just with you, Jasmine, about like having a question, and if if the writer really wants to know something, that's the fuel that makes the book go.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
I think that was all of us on that.
That's all of you? Okay. Okay. Can you talk about what the writing process is like for each of you? You can just jump in. And we'll start with Brendan again. I shouldn't call on you, but why don't you lead us off and then just jump in.
No problem. Yeah, I'm kind of in a transitional phase with my writing. Just leaving school where I was working really closely with professors and with colleagues in the MFA program. Where I was in kind of this structured environment where I was completing assignments that were, mandated in either length or topic or subject. And so I'm kind of wondering that same question for myself right now is, what does the creative process look for me now that I'm kind of writing independently and not in a system anymore? And I think that just curiosity is really fundamental to that. That's kind of the seed that every essay and every short story and every piece of writing kind of blooms out of, is what piques your interest and what kind of ideas are you willing to chase. One of my professors at Hiram College, Mary Quaid, who has been really influential in my writing career, once in class said, the hardest thing for a young writer is knowing when your wild hair is a good wild hair and that you should chase it. And so I think that's the start of the creative process for everyone, is seeing that wild hair, so to speak, and deciding to chase it, and following it down its rabbit hole if that's where it leads. And so that's I think probably my favorite metaphor for the creative process, is that you just get into the weeds and start searching around until you find everything starts to make sense and coalesce around the project that you're working on. Beyond that, like I said, it's being independently accountable to myself now. Is I'm still laying the framework for that in terms of actually producing work. But I think that it's just like a lifelong learning and growing process.
Okay. Anybody want to jump in next?
Maybe I'll jump in.
Okay.
I will be honest. Writing for me is so stressful. I like finishing it rather than the actual process of doing it. It stresses me out. I wish I could say more romantic things about that process, but
you're a kindred soul. Dorothy Parker once said, "I hate to write, I love to have written," and that's pretty. I can understand that phrase really well.
I think the thing that helps me the most, and I do this the same way whenever I'm drawing, whenever I don't really know what idea I'm trying to do, I just sketch a bunch. and I do a lot of really fast sketches, and I just keep going and going and going and going. And I like just producing a lot, because I find when you start to produce a lot of stories or produce a lot of drawings, you get less precious about things. You overthink less, and you just kind of try to put ideas down. And so a lot of the stuff that you'll put down isn't really much of anything, but then at least you can kind of go back and look, and you're like, oh no, something's here, something's there. And then you draw some more, and you draw some more, and you draw some more. And so usually, because I find writing so stressful, that is my approach to writing. And so before I did Saturday, I think I would just do multiple children's book stories a week, and just do as many as I could. And then and the interesting thing that kind of happened was all the stories that I had written, I kind of just like threw away, but I was glad that I wrote them, because I started to see things that I was doing. Like, I think a big thing is, particularly in picture books, when you're writing for children, is not to try to lecture children or get too involved in whatever message or thing you have on your heart, but really think about what's going to make a kid smile, that's really going to entertain them. And so I think the more and more you write and you just kind of produce a lot, you just get freer, you get less in your head, and you kind of enter into more of like a childlike mindset and create a story. And so that's what I hope always happens.
Thank you. It has, yes.
That reminds me of a great moment in the Annie Dillard book, The Writing Life. I don't know if you've ever read that, but she has a similar advice as what you were saying, that you can't save anything. You have to spend everything, all of it, right now. The moment the idea comes to you, she said, the great line is like, the impulse to save an interesting thing for later should be the cue to spend it now. Because if everything that you save, when you go back to it, it's gone to ash. Right.
I have actually I've never read that book, but a fellow illustrator of mine, Sophie Bacall, loves that quote. And so it's actually on my wall. And so
no kidding.
I was like, oh, it's right there.
Yeah.
Yep. So I would definitely agree with that.
Great. That's great. How about you, Ken?
Yeah, well, I still haven't developed an actual process for writing. I know I'll have to do that eventually. The one thing I can say is that I've never written anything where I started at the beginning and wrote through to the end. I always start like somewhere in the middle and put pieces together. And I probably should have an outline, but I don't do an outline until I've got most of it. And then I sort of go back and do it after the fact and outline what I've got. Because, you know, if you're going to send off a proposal to an agent or publisher, you need to have like the outline of it, but it happens later. So ideas just come to me, and I'll scribble things down on index cards while I'm out walking around in the woods or something, and gradually all the pieces come together. So all I can say is that if anyone really wants to be a writer, they shouldn't follow my example.
Jeannie, how about you?
I feel like so much of the process when I'm stuck, it's like looking into the refrigerator, just thinking maybe the answers, and just staring, right? Or staring at the wall. I just think so much of the writing process is thinking. And I don't know, with like both of my books, the process was very different, where the first one, it was very much in collage mode. And I think that's because it started as poetry, shifted to fiction, went to nonfiction. I was trying out different genres and different forms. And where I like to print my manuscript single side. Well, you can see on my binders, I use those for different projects. I like to print things single-sided and then, you know, put them in a binder, but cut them apart and rearrange, and sometimes look for artful juxtapositions or cut a paragraph up and look for opportunities to deepen. But then the second book wasn't very collagey. It was more methodical and moving. I thought I was writing slowly, where I was going sentence by sentence, which was very unusual for me. But it actually, not to say we should value speed, it seems like such an American thing of like productivity, but it did go a lot more quickly for me, because I wrote a sentence and I would think, okay, looking back, like what comes next? And it sounds so basic, but it really helped me see it through. But I think like it changes project to project. It depends what the demands are, what the questions are. And I think it's at the start of the project and the very end of one when I need the most discipline, and it's like, okay, get up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and don't check the news, don't check, just start writing. But when I'm in the middle of a project, that's the best part because you're forming connections constantly. Suddenly everything becomes potential material or potential answers to a problem that you're facing. So yeah, I think it just depends on, I feel like each time, like now I'm back in that period. That's why the award is so nice. It gives you a renewed sense of confidence. But like each time I finish something, I'm like, oh, I'll never write again. I forget how to write. How did I do that? And it's also a lot of patience. I think that's another huge part of the process is being patient with yourself.
Okay, and Jasmine.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has already said. I think it's very similar for me. I'm sort of I guess every book I would say has a different process because I have to learn how to write that particular book. But the fundamentals that I think kind of glue together for me are that I'm a fumbler and a collector, and that I never quite know what the book is that I'm setting out to write. And so I sort of fumble through it. But sort of like Oge mentioned that there's a quality of fun to that, and I try to keep that sort of quality of play and fun because that's one of the things that I love about writing is the messiness of it, and that I don't know, even though it's also the part that makes me feel very frustrated often. So I think that so much of my writing process is letting ideas marinate. So the characters and the voice and the storyline live with me for a long time, and I'm thinking about them when I'm driving around or when I'm going to the grocery store, and then slowly I start to build those connections. But it's definitely like a messy, long process that I think is easy to romanticize once I finished a book, to look back and see all the moments that I enjoyed when things clicked, and sort of forget about all the moments that I wanted to give up on the book. And so I think that that's what I have to remind myself of every time that I start again, that it wasn't always like just fun and joy with the book that was completed.
Be painful, yes. If anyone wants to ask questions, please type them in the chat room there. Hit chat and do it, and we'll answer them. What did you learn while writing this book? Talk about that process. Did you learn anything? Anybody? I'm not going to call this time. I'm not going to call it because that's kind of a tough question. Anyway, you want to jump in? Nobody's going to jump in. I'm going to have to call on people. Brendan.
I learned a lot about German adoption law. Very strange. And the wonders of Google Translate. You could take happily. I mean, I had to figure out what exactly, if the child is going into an orphanage, what are the rules that govern how the child gets out of the orphanage? And it being Germany, of course, there are rules, and they're written down. And I couldn't read German, but Google Translate could like turn an entire book into something approximating English, and that and 100,000 other things I learned a lot about.
Where did the research take you? Because that must have been tough. Your research, where did that take you to write this? Did you do a lot of research on the book? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I in 100,000 places. I mean, I talked to my dad a lot about a good part of the book takes place at the Siege of Kherson, and this amazing moment when for him that he thought he just figured he was going to die there because he was a Marine, basically hiding out for most of the time, and didn't have any idea the larger significance of anything that was going on. And then he came home and had a second tour of duty, then came home to stay. And then 7 or 8 years later, he was watching a documentary on TV, and found out that it had been Kherson had been the largest aerial bombardment in the history of warfare. I mean, he was in the middle of history and only knew the tiniest little part that was immediately surrounding him. He was an enlisted man, which was why he was like, I mean, he was a just selfishly as a fiction writer, exactly the kind of source that you want for a novel, because everything that he remembered because it was real, not because it conformed with the larger history that we would, not because historians would later say that it was important. And it's those things that, like, I forget who coined this term, but often what you're looking for is a significant irrelevance. Something that it details. Chekhov is very good at this. Like, it's so irresponsible to everything else that's going on in the story that you believe it absolutely, and it becomes the source of reality.
Thank you. Ken, how about you?
Yeah, most of the books I've written have been reference books. But the latest one, A Season on the Wind, has got, there is a lot of information in it. And every time I start in to write a book like that, I sort of assume that I know the subject really thoroughly, but once you get into it and you have to put it down in black and white, I start thinking, well, so even though I'd read, dozens of books and thousands of scientific papers about bird migration before, I had to go in and reread or read all the latest information because, there's new research being done and new stuff coming out. And I had to learn a lot more about the local geography of Northwestern Ohio because I didn't know it as well as I thought I did. So it's always a learning project. And, I feel like I know the subject completely until I start to write it down.
Ms. Moore, how about you? Anything you learned while writing the book? Did I pronounce your name wrong? Yeah, you're mute. You're on mute.
Oh, you're talking. You said Mora, so I was
No,
like,
I'm sorry. How do you pronounce your name? I should have paid attention.
Oh, my name's Oge.
Oge. Okay, and your last name? Your last name? Okay. Okay. How about you? What did you learn about when writing this book? What did you learn about?
Well, I don't know if I've learned much when writing it, but I think the really cool thing about making artwork is, part of the need to make artwork or make collages is that you don't actually have the words for what you're trying to convey, and you just kind of know you don't know how to express it to someone, but you know how it feels, and so that's what you kind of like weave into all of your work. And so it's kind of nice, particularly when I think about my artwork, is looking back at it over time and discovering new things within my work and understanding more and learning to kind of find the language for when I made it, I didn't really have the language for it yet.
That's gotta be challenging to find the language, to take words and really translate them into pictures. Is that a challenge?
I think, I guess I don't really think of it as like translating words into pictures. It's kind of, it's like they're both like, you're kind of going back and forth in between, like I know a lot of author and illustrators who actually like make illustrations before they like write everything, or some people kind of go back and forth. For the most part, I like write before I illustrate, but there's like a lot of like the illustrations or things that you'll see in my sketchbook. I was already kind of playing around with particular things that were just kind of stuck particularly in my mind. Something that was kind of interesting about a book like Saturday is so much of Saturday has a musicality to it. And a lot of the characters' positions, it kind of looks like they're dancing from page to page. And I didn't plan this from the beginning, but that's the fun of making artwork, is finding the surprises later on. But I use a lot of old songbooks in the collages.
Okay.
And it was kind of interesting, kind of looking back and seeing all the different ways that I'm kind of creating the language within the book. So
now, do you use different materials for your collages?
Yeah. So
tell me how you choose the materials and what you use. You saw songbooks are one. What are some of the other favorite materials?
Songbooks, newspapers, birthday cards, paper I make myself, things I paint over. Sometimes I'll like cut out pieces of paper and I'll start kind of layering them on top of each other and paint some more on it and just use different kind of tools and things like that. One of the things I love particularly about collage is that it's just anything goes. I think it was hilarious. I was talking to my agent, I think some weeks back, and he always kind of sends out cookies and things like that, and they come with like this like little craft note. And I just love this craft paper that it comes with, because most craft paper, this is like a weird artist thing, but like most craft paper has a very warm tone, most craft papers you see, but this craft paper has a slightly cooler tone than most craft papers. And so like, I really appreciated the cookies and like the nice kind of heartfelt note, but that definitely went into my paper drawers and ended up flying into one of my books. And so from like my family and the people I know me very well, where I might be like, oh, thank you, and unwrap my gift and then like keep the wrapping paper.
He's more than a gift, it sounds like many times. That's great.
When I was still going to schools, like kids will like hear about like my paper process. And so sometimes my gifts are, someone gave me like some green paper from some cake shop that like it still had a little frosting on it, but I ended up using the paper. But I get lots of paper on, I used to get lots of paper on my travels as well, which is great.
That's great. When people see somebody sending you paper, that's great.
People have, it's kind of great.
Jeannie, how about you? What did you learn while writing this book?
Gosh, so much, because I think it goes back to Jasmine had mentioned, you know, starting with a question. I think so many questions were informing my exploration. Certainly, it was fascinating to me that the changing definitions of sexual assault and rape and how that really shapes one's understanding of what happened to oneself. That was really interesting, and to see how it differs state by state. And then after the book came out, certainly talking with readers about that, and for them to like read a definition and realize, oh, what I experienced was rape, you know, like not having necessarily the language for it. And it seems like such an obviously Neanderthal thing. Like, of course, language shapes our thinking, but it was really interesting to read about the history of the law and like what shaped these motivations behind certain definitions. But then something else was, I understood it conceptually, but this idea of gender performance, or the performance of gender. And I, you know, when I started my project and I was going to reach out, I reached out to this former friend. I thought, okay, I'm going to be very tough on him. I'm going to ask him, you know, really hard questions. And I have a list in the book of the questions I thought I was going to ask him. And then as soon as I heard his voice, I recorded all of these conversations. As soon as I heard his voice, I slipped back into like our friendship. I mean, we had been friends for almost 5 years. And so I immediately became accommodating and wanting to make him comfortable and saying, oh, no, I'm okay. Like enough time has passed. And like listening back to it was a little mortifying, because I knew to an extent, certainly that I did this, but I just didn't realize to what extent. So that was something interesting that I learned about myself. But so much of the book became about female friendships. Like a lot of my friends read the transcripts of the conversations, my interviews with him. And, you know, they were, they found it so obnoxious, like his answers. And then I would make excuses for him. And so that it was just the self-awareness that came through in writing the project, I think was really meaningful. Not that I write for catharsis and it's not that, but I think the history of rape law and then just listening to those interviews and transcribing them and really witnessing myself performing, like doing gender performance, where it doesn't feel like a performance, right? It feels very genuine, but these are learned behaviors. So I'd say those were two of the big things I learned.
Okay, and Jasmine, how about you? What did you learn while writing your book?
I guess maybe on like a philosophical level, which I can only now see after having written the book, but this idea of writing into what you're afraid of in some ways and things that make you uncomfortable. And in doing that, you can find this like patch of light to work within. And I think that when I first started this book, I was coming up against a lot of walls because I didn't want to go to these places that made me uncomfortable or made me upset, and realizing that through writing into that, I would be able to kind of get to the light on the other side. And then the main character, Jude, is confident in a way that I wasn't as a young person. And I think that in writing her confidence and this sort of bravery, it sort of made me braver to be able to go out and talk about this book in ways that used to make me really uncomfortable to talk about. And so I think that I kind of learned through writing that. Yeah, so I don't know. And just a big part of writing for kids is getting to see how children react to the book and absorb the book. And before the world shut down, I was getting to do a lot of school visits. And I think that through writing this book, I've learned, again, it's reconfirmed so much for what I thought about the young reader, but that you can trust them and they make these connections. And they've taught me things about the book that I didn't realize. So I guess I've learned from writing, but that's been like an incredible gift to see the book again, kind of through the way that they experienced it.
Okay, one final question I have, and anybody can jump in if you know. What's next for you? Will your next project be? Anybody want to share that?
Well, I have a new book coming out in May. It's another middle grade novel. It's called The Shape of Thunder, and it is about two young girls who it takes place a year after a school shooting has happened at the high school in their small Ohio town. They're both middle schoolers, but the book explores the way they've both been affected by this tragedy. They're kind of on opposite sides of the tragedy, and their friendship has been fractured by it. So I talked a little bit, I guess, at the beginning when we were asked about like favorite books when we were young, about The Bridge to Terabitha, and this book in some ways is like my homage to that book. It's a book about two kids who are kind of finding a place where they can feel safe, and kind of feels like magic when the rest of the world feels unsafe.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else want to mention what's next in their world with books?
I've had success in projects in the past of not necessarily knowing what the end project or product was going to look like, or the connections that I was going to find once I started exploring a topic. But I went up to Alberta a few years ago to work with some ecologists who were studying this shortgrass fescue prairie in southern Alberta. And at the time I was really obsessed with this idea of points of inaccessibility, which are the points on a body of land, which is the furthest point you can get from any shoreline. And the point of inaccessibility in North America is in South Dakota. And my plan was to visit try to find this spot on my way up to Alberta or my way back. And I was just kind of consumed with this idea of standing on the heart of the continent. But the more time I spent up in Alberta with these ecologists and these scientists who are studying this really complex ecosystem, the more I realized that the identity and the heart of a geographic place is much more abstract and takes into consideration a lot more things than just the physical location. And so that was an example of a project that really just kind of unfolded around me as I was within it. And right now I'm really interested in barn owls, which are an endangered species in Iowa. And I'm not really sure where the barn owls are going to take me, but I think just kind of jumping in with both feet has worked out well in the past. And so I've got these kinds of ideas of knocking together some nesting boxes and just seeing what happens once the barn owls come to visit.
Okay. Anybody else want to share what's next? No?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
As we speak, as I turn around, I'm here in my studio in Rhode Island, but I'm working on my next book. It's not a book I wrote, but it's a book I'm illustrating called Everybody in the Red Brick Building. It's supposed to come in 2021. And it's this really fabulous little bedtime story about this red brick building that's all quiet and everything's wonderful. And then the baby wakes up. The baby wakes up somebody else and somebody else. So please feel free to look forward to that sometime another fall.
Okay. Anybody else? Going once, going twice?
Sure, sure, I'll talk. I'm actually deep into another book project now that's, it's got birds in it, but it's about the history of discovery, sort of the end of the age of discovery of birds in Eastern North America in the early 1800s, when almost all the obvious birds had been discovered. I mean, everybody knew about blue jays and red-headed woodpeckers, but just sort of the last few birds in that region to be discovered, and why they remained undetected for so long. So I'm pretty far along with that.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, David, thank you. Thank you to all. It was a pleasure being here with you tonight. I feel you're all kindred spirits who really share my love of books and reading. So I'm so glad that David and his team at Ohioana was able to present this tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Ken, Salvatore, Jeannie, Oge, Brendan, and Jasmine, and even though they were not here, David McCullough, Hanif, I salute them too as winners. I salute you all as winners. I know this wasn't the way that we thought this was going to be. We thought we were going to have a big party and celebrate, but hopefully next year, which will be the 80th anniversary of the Ohioana Awards, we will be there. And so I want to thank all of our funders and our partners and donors and presenters, the Ohioana staff and board. A reminder, you can watch tonight's program. Maybe they'll edit out the first part where I got, screwed up on the Ohio Channel website. And you can read all about the winners in the Fall Ohioana Quarterly, which is now on Ohioana's website. You can get copies of all of our winners' books from the Book Loft at German Village. So go on www.bookloft.com. And again, and Brendan, for you, you're following. You've got 2 book award winners here who were once where you were. So we hope that first book is coming. As a matter of fact, I wanted to mention, Jeannie's winning essay, The Glass Eye, it turned out to be like, her first book. And Salvatore told me the first time I met him that his book, The End, which was a National Book Award finalist, had its genesis early in the story that he wrote that won the Marvin Grant in 1999. So no writing, I guess, goes to waste is the summary that we can take away from this. So we hope everyone has a safe and happy holiday, a healthy, prosperous New Year. And we thank you all again for joining us for this virtual Ohioana Book Award ceremony. So good night, everyone. Stay safe and well. And we hope to see you live and in person next year. Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.